There's a bird in your yard right now that's been assessing you, not for months, not for a season, for as long as it has lived there. And what it's been doing this entire time is far more fascinating than most people realize. Before we begin, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden intelligence of the birds living right outside your window, subscribe to Bird Intelligence and join thousands of bird lovers discovering what most people never notice. Now here's something surprising. That bird isn't waiting for you in the emotional way people often imagine. It's not sitting on a fence dreaming about friendship, but according to what researchers have discovered, it has been quietly building a profile of you for years, hundreds, maybe even thousands of tiny observations. Every time you walked to the mailbox, every time you watered the garden, every time you opened the back door, every time you stepped onto the porch without realizing anyone was watching, the bird noticed. And there is one simple thing you can do that may change how that bird sees you forever. Most people never do it, not because they don't care, but because they have absolutely no idea it matters. To understand why, we first need to understand something even more remarkable. The bird already knows far more about you than you think. Imagine a Northern Cardinal that has visited your yard for 3 years. Every morning when you stepped outside, every afternoon when you worked in the garden, every evening when you carried groceries through the yard. The bird was there, watching, learning, recording patterns. Now, that doesn't mean the cardinal recognizes your face the same way a crow can. Crows are famous for their extraordinary ability to identify individual humans. Songbirds, like cardinals, operate differently. Instead of memorizing faces, they build something researchers often describe as a pattern profile. Your walking style, the rhythm of your daily routine, the sound of your voice drifting through an open window, the way you move around familiar spaces. The bird may not know your name, but it absolutely knows your pattern, and after years of observation, that pattern has become deeply familiar. Here's something I'd love to know. Do you have one particular bird that seems to show up again and again in your yard? A cardinal, a robin, a mourning dove? Tell us in the comments. I'm always curious which birds become regular visitors for different people. This is where things become truly interesting, because the bird has already categorized you. In most cases, you've been placed into a simple category: safe. You don't chase it. You don't throw things at it. You don't move unpredictably. You don't behave like a threat. So over months and years, the bird gradually places you into its mental map of the environment as something relatively harmless. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. That category is never permanent. Birds constantly update their assessment of everything around them: trees, animals, feeders, predators, and humans. Every single day, they collect new information. Every single day, they decide whether something deserves more caution or less, which means there is a way to move from being background scenery to becoming a specifically recognized low-risk human. And that shift is what many people mistakenly describe as a bird warming up to them. The truth is actually much more fascinating, because it isn't based on emotion. It's based on behavior, and the science behind it is extraordinary. One of the most fascinating things birds monitor is something humans rarely think about: your attention, not just whether you're present, but whether you're paying attention to them. Researchers studying European magpies discovered something remarkable. The birds allowed people to approach much closer when those people looked away, but when a person stared directly at them, they became alert much sooner and flew away at greater distances. Think about that for a moment. The birds weren't simply tracking the presence of a human. They were tracking where the human's attention was directed. And this behavior isn't limited to magpies. Scientists have documented similar responses across many bird species. The reason goes back millions of years, long before bird feeders, long before suburban neighborhoods, long before humans built backyards. In nature, predators look directly at their prey before attacking. A fox does it. A hawk does it. A cat does it. Direct, focused attention has always carried danger. Birds that failed to notice where predators were looking didn't survive very long. Over countless generations, birds became experts at reading visual attention, which brings us to the one signal that changes everything: a brief acknowledgement, not a stare, not intense eye contact, just a soft glance. 2 seconds, maybe less. A calm moment of awareness. Then you naturally look away. That tiny action creates something unusual in the bird's world. Most people ignore birds completely. Others stare at them for too long. Birds have already learned those patterns, but a short, relaxed acknowledgement followed by no threatening behavior creates a new category of information. And whenever something new appears, birds pay attention. Have you ever noticed a bird freeze for a moment after you looked at it? If you have, tell me about it below. What species was it? And what happened next? you might have witnessed exactly what we're talking about here, because the bird notices almost immediately. Sometimes it pauses, sometimes it tilts its head, sometimes it seems to stare right back. Popular culture often interprets this as a magical moment of connection. The science is a little different, but honestly, it's just as fascinating. When the bird freezes, it isn't feeling emotional recognition. It's recalculating. Something unexpected happened. You broke your normal routine. Instead of walking by, you stopped. Instead of ignoring it, you acknowledged it. Now the bird has to gather more information. And that's exactly what the head tilt is for. Birds don't see the world the same way humans do. Most songbirds have eyes positioned on the sides of their heads. When they tilt their head, they're often bringing one eye into a better viewing angle. They're trying to get a clearer look. They're collecting data. They're asking a simple question. What changed? That question matters, because the moment the bird begins collecting new information about you, you've already become different from the previous 1,000 encounters. You are no longer just part of the scenery. You have become worth evaluating. And that evaluation is the first step toward a measurable change in behavior. Now let's add another piece of the puzzle. Your voice. This part surprises almost everyone. Research involving house sparrows found that birds can learn to associate specific human voices with specific outcomes. Some voices become linked with danger, others become linked with food, and many become linked with simple neutral presence. Think about the birds in your own yard. How many times have they heard your voice? Hundreds, thousands. They've heard conversations through open windows, phone calls on the porch, family gatherings, laughter, arguments, everyday life. Your voice is already part of their environment. But there's one thing most birds almost never hear: you speaking calmly and directly toward them. Not loudly, not excitedly, not trying to attract attention, just quietly, naturally. Soft vocalizations create a very different acoustic profile than normal human activity. The bird doesn't understand your words, not a single one, but it does process the tone, the rhythm, the volume, the emotional energy carried by the sound. A calm voice contains no obvious signs of aggression, no alarm, no threat, no sudden intensity, and birds are exceptionally good at detecting those differences. Here's a question for you. Have you ever spoken softly to a bird in your yard? If you have, what did you say? And did the bird seem to react at all? I love reading stories about these moments because so many people notice similar reactions. When you combine the brief glance with a soft voice, something interesting happens. Researchers studying long-term interactions between humans and birds have repeatedly observed the same pattern. The bird notices immediately, maybe only for a fraction of a second, but it notices, and from that point forward, the profile it has built about you begins to change. What happens after that first moment is where the real transformation begins. Not because the bird suddenly becomes your friend, not because it has developed affection in the human sense, but because it starts revising its risk model, and that matters more than most people realize. Birds that repeatedly experience calm, predictable, low-risk interactions with the same human gradually change their behavior in measurable ways. They stay visible longer. They spend less time hiding. They return to feeders more confidently when that person is nearby. They reduce alarm responses, and in many cases, they allow significantly closer approaches than they would with strangers. The bird isn't thinking, "I like this person." It's thinking something much more practical. This individual has consistently proven safe. For a wild animal, that's an important distinction, and the results become obvious if you pay attention. Maybe the cardinal stays on the fence while you refill the feeder instead of flying across the yard. Maybe the chickadee waits nearby instead of disappearing into the trees. Maybe the robin continues searching for worms while you work in the garden. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Changes that tell you the bird's assessment of you has shifted. What's fascinating is how quickly these changes can begin. Not overnight, not after a single interaction, but often within days or weeks of consistent behavior. The key word is consistency. Birds don't trust dramatic gestures. They trust patterns, the same way they've been studying your routine for months or years. They're studying any new behavior you introduce. And if that behavior remains calm, predictable, and harmless, it eventually becomes part of their understanding of who you are. The time scale becomes even more powerful when you consider the lifespan of the birds around you. A black-capped chickadee in the wild often lives only a few years. A robin may average around 2 years. A cardinal may average 3 years, though some individuals live much longer. Think about that. The chickadee visiting your feeder today may have been coming there for most of its entire life. Every season, every snowfall, every summer storm, every migration period, every breeding season, and through all of it, you've been part of its environment. Whether you realized it or not, You're one of the largest moving features in the landscape it knows. The bird has been learning from you every single day, and that's why those 2 seconds matter. To us, 2 seconds feels insignificant. To a bird that spends every day balancing food, predators, weather, competition, and survival, 2 seconds repeated over months can become a meaningful part of its experience. Here's something I'd love to hear from you. How long do you think the oldest bird visiting your yard has known you? A few months? Several years? Maybe even longer? Let me know in the comments. I think many people would be surprised by the answers. There are even documented examples of birds continuing to visit places associated with specific humans long after those people stopped appearing. This behavior is most famously observed in crows and other corvids. Their intelligence allows them to form remarkably sophisticated associations. While it would be inaccurate to assume cardinals or chickadees experience these situations exactly the same way, the broader lesson remains true. Birds learn. Birds remember. Birds adapt, and they constantly update their understanding of the humans around them. That means the bird in your yard today already has an opinion about you, not an emotional opinion, not a human opinion, a behavioral one, a risk assessment built from hundreds or thousands of observations. And tomorrow morning, you have the opportunity to change that assessment. When you step outside, pause for just a moment. Find the bird that's already waiting nearby. There's a good chance one will be there. After all, they've learned your schedule long before you learned theirs. Look gently in its direction, just for a second or two. No staring, no sudden movements, no attempt to approach. Then say something quietly. Anything at all. A simple good morning, a calm greeting. Whatever feels natural. Then continue with your day. Do this consistently for a week. Watch carefully. Notice what changes. Notice how long the bird stays. Notice how quickly it returns. Notice whether its alarm response becomes softer, because chances are you'll begin seeing subtle differences that were invisible before, and those differences represent something remarkable. Not friendship, not ownership, not a special bond in the way humans usually imagine. Something arguably more fascinating. A wild animal independently deciding that your presence belongs among the safe parts of its world. For a creature that spends every day evaluating danger, that is no small thing. Less time spent worrying, more time feeding, more time resting, more time doing the things that make survival possible. And all because of a few seconds of calm attention. For the tiny life that has been quietly observing you all these years, that may be one of the most meaningful gifts you can give. Before you go, tell me in the comments, is there one specific bird you've started recognizing as an individual visitor? Have you ever stopped and acknowledged it directly? And if you did you notice any change in the way it behaved afterward? I read every comment and love hearing your stories. If you enjoyed this video and want to discover more hidden behaviors happening right outside your window, be sure to subscribe to Bird Intelligence. Every week, we uncover the fascinating secrets of backyard birds that most people never notice. Thank you for watching Bird Intelligence, and I'll see you in the next video.